All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, if you are out on the East Coast, and good morning, I should say, if you're out on the West Coast. Thanks so much for being here for today's Bloomerang webinar, the top 5 questions aspiring nonprofit consultants ask. And my name is Stephen Shattuck, and I'm the Chief Engagement Officer over here at Bloomerang, and I'll be moderating today's discussion, as always. And just a couple of housekeeping items before we get going. Just want to let you all know that we are recording this session, and we'll be sending out the recording as well as the slides later on this afternoon. So if you're going to get some really good tips, so don't worry about missing anything. And if you have to leave early, perhaps if you got a meeting or something else pulls you away, don't worry. I'll get that recording in your hands today for sure. Most importantly, you may have already heard me say this before we started, but we love for these sessions to be interactive. We're going to save some time for Q&A at the end. So do not be shy. Please send us your questions here in the chat box just throughout the hour. Don't sit on those hands. We got 2 experts here on the topic who are going to be standing by to answer your questions at the end. And you can also ask questions on Twitter. I'll keep an eye on the Twitter feed if you'd rather use that. Social media perhaps. And one last bit of housekeeping. If you have any trouble hearing us through your computer speakers, we find that the audio by phone is usually a lot better. So if you have a phone nearby and you don't mind dialing in and that'll be comfortable for you, try that before you totally give up on us. There's a phone number you can dial into that was sent in the Ready Talk email that went out about an hour or so ago today. So try that if you have any issues with your computer. And if this is your first Bloomerang webinar, I just want to say an extra special welcome to you folks. If this is your first one, you may not know about us or what we do here, but we do webinars every single Thursday, so we'd love to have you back next week or whatever Thursday works out best for you. And if you've never heard of Bloomerang, the company, we are a provider of donor management software. So if that interests you, or maybe you just kind of want to learn more about what we have going on, there is a quick video demo that you can watch on our website. Don't even have to talk to a salesperson if you don't want to. So check that out. Don't do that right now because you've got a really cool session coming up here. We have got a longtime friend of Bloomerang. We've got a new friend of Bloomerang teaming up here. We've got Susan Schaefer and Don Tebbe joining us from beautiful and sunny, they say, Washington, D.C. So Susan, Don, how's it going? Are you both still with me, hopefully?
Yes.
I am. You, Don?
I am. Ready to go.
All right, cool. Man, I'm excited about this one. We've had this on the schedule, I feel like, for a while now, and I got a peek at the slides earlier this week. I'm excited. This is going to be a good session, and I just want to give you a little bit of context about the 2 presenters here. If you don't know Susan and Don, definitely check them out. Susan has been doing her own fundraising consultancy since back in 2001. She has a consultancy called Resource Partners. Check it out. She also co-edited the Nonprofit Consulting Playbook, which is the topic of this session. So she definitely knows what she's talking about. We got a chance to chat earlier before the session. She let me know that she does a lot of coaching for aspiring consultants too, which is really cool. And she has been a partner of Don's for a few years here. They've actually both facilitated workshops on this topic before. You'll definitely feel like they've done this before after listening to the session. Don, a little bit about Don. He has been consulting since back in 1993. He's worked in the government sector, business sector, and the nonprofit sector, and has definitely been helping sort of navigate aspiring consultants through the waters of their career. And these 2 have been working together since 2015. You might have heard a webinar from Susan a couple of years ago. She's been on the Bloomerang webinar series before. She was actually my first guest on our video podcast. So it's awesome to have Susan back. It's been cool to get to know Don over the last few weeks as we've been planning this. So I have already taken up way too much time blabbering on. I'm going to pass it off to these 2 to tell you all about becoming a nonprofit consultant. So Susan, Don, take it away, my friend.
All right. Stephen, thanks so much, and thanks for all of you for joining us today. We have a real simple agenda. We're going to address 5 questions that new consultants, aspiring consultants ask when they're first getting started. And as Stephen said, we've got a chunk of time at the end to really get into your questions. So encourage you to put them in the chat so we can get some really good questions queued up here. So let's get rolling here. So first of all, consulting is a personality and very personal, personality-driven and personal business. And really, no matter what you hear about best practices and trends, your business is going to be a unique reflection of who you are, your goals, your strengths, and quite frankly, your weaknesses. And so we really want to make that point right up front because consulting really is, I think, unique even among service businesses that we bring our whole selves to this. So we hope that we're going to take away some foundation pieces for the business that you're planning to build or help you decide whether or not consulting is going to be right for you. And on that point, we encourage you to stick around for the full webinar because we've got a link to a startup checklist that comes right out of our Launching Your Consulting Practice course, our Power Planner piece for that course, and sure that you're going to want to get that downloaded if you're really serious about looking at consulting. So we're going to briefly introduce ourselves, so I'm going to turn the mic over to Susan.
Great. Well, thanks. As Stephen said so well, Don and I have worked together for several years, and we have, over these years, been peers and supervisors, mentors, and even workshop leaders for hundreds of new consultants now. So we've had a chance to be in lots of rooms with people, and the questions that you'll hear today come directly from that experience. And it is pretty amazing after a while how similar all of our concerns are. And I'll tell you, every time I hear them, it takes me back to my first years of consulting because these are some of the exact questions I had as well. So we'll go through those questions. We will give you some answers, I hope, and then have time for some questions again at the end. So let's just give you a very brief rundown since Stephen did such a great job introducing us. I'll just say again quickly that when I started consulting 17 years ago, I had lots of questions, and you'll see some of that reflected today. I was and still remain a solo consultant, but I do partner pretty regularly with other consultants and subcontractors. Even though Don and I spend a lot of time training new consultants now, we each both maintain our own consulting practices. And I saw a couple of you in the chat box saying that you're in freelance grant writing, and that's pretty much where I was 17 years ago. I've since transitioned slightly to helping organizations build their base of national foundation funders. And now I help clients not only secure the funding, but build organizations that are really capable of running well those kind of mega grants. So when I began consulting, the resources were really slim, especially for people in our sector. So one of my passions has been helping other consultants get off the ground, let's say, a lot more smoothly than I did. It went fine for me, but boy, with resources like, frankly, some of the ones we'll talk about today, things would have gone much more quickly. So with that, Don, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Great. Well, like Susan, I started out too as a solo practitioner, and I was a former association executive, so I had a pretty good network, and so I ended up doing a lot of different things, including 5 different assignments as an interim nonprofit CEO. But it wasn't really until I niched down on executive transitions and leadership succession that I started to feel like I had a real business. And in the early 2000s, I co-founded a firm that my business partner and I built into a 7-figure national practice. And I sold my interest in that company to return to the freedom of being a solo practitioner. I missed all of the freedom of just, calling my own shots. Even though I was a co-owner of the company, I started feeling a lot more like an employee than an entrepreneur. And so right now I'm sort of in this encore career stage of my life. As Stephen said, Susan and I created our partnership in 2015 because we really wanted to help others find the sense of freedom and the contribution and, quite frankly, the financial rewards that a consulting business can make possible. So we'd like to learn a little bit about you. If you're on this webinar, you're probably in one of 3 places. Exploring consulting as a business. Maybe you're actively planning to launch a consulting practice, or maybe you've got a consulting practice business or consulting business already underway. Help us get a sense of where you are. Could you type into the chat exploring, planning, or underway? Exploring if you're just starting to think about it, planning if you're actively planning, or underway if you've already launched your consulting business. Oh. Wow, lots of exploring, some planning, some underway. Great. It's been underway for 3 years. Exploring, underway. Great. Well, that helps a great deal because it helps us, kind of figure out where we want to emphasize things. Sorry, I forgot to advance the slide there. We'll keep rolling here. I do that one on occasion. I get to talking here and forget to do the clicks. So if you're planning to be a solo business person, or if you're planning to work with a small group, you'll be building a firm that's really going to be based on your strengths and your personal preferences and your values and your motivations. So we really think it's important to get all the questions out there that you can. And with that, let's get started with the top 5 questions. And a quick reminder, if your burning question doesn't get on this list or it doesn't appear on our list, you'll get a chance to ask that during the session. But we have a feeling that at least a couple of your questions will show up in the next several minutes. And so now, question number 1, and a drum roll, please, Susan, take it away.
Thanks. All right, so here we go with the first of the top 5, in no particular order, it's worth saying. So the first question is, should I position myself as a generalist or a specialist? Something that we get asked quite often. So does this look familiar? Those of you who have begun consulting, you might feel this way sometimes because this is a classic consulting dilemma. As a new consultant, you may have days when you feel like the woman in this slide, when you feel like you would do just about anything it takes to secure your next client. So it makes sense that you're constantly toying with the idea of where your specialty or lack of specialty should lie. On those days that you feel that way, you might also feel like you want to market yourself accordingly, that being instinctively rather than planning it all out. So when that happens, you're not really controlling your own marketing. It means that your business is controlling you rather than the other way around. So we want to give you a bit of a framework as to how to think about the way in which you position your business. You've got 2 doors here, right? The generalist and the specialist door. And what we recommend, at least at the beginning, that tends to work, is to market yourself as a specialist and then practice selectively as a generalist. What does this mean? Let's first go narrow. So here's the narrow cave for you. When you position yourself as a specialist in the market, the biggest advantage is that people are more apt to remember you and remember what it is you do. When they're in need of someone with your services, chances are they're going to know a very small number of people with your skill set. You'll be very memorable. So as an example, if I'm in a room full of nonprofit fundraisers, am I going to introduce myself as a nonprofit fundraiser? Probably not, because otherwise, how will anyone remember exactly what it is I do? I'm more memorable if I can highlight my work securing grants from national foundations, the ones whose names we all know. Or I might talk about an outcome of that work, that I help nonprofits scale their programs and serve more people, for instance. By talking about and working in this space, the majority of my clients over the years have requested engagements where we do exactly what I just described. We're working to solicit large grants from mega foundations. Now, does that mean that I've never secured work on other types of engagements? Absolutely not. And I'd argue that there can be a downside to working solely in a very narrow specialty area, at least for most of us, and at least at the beginning. So let's now go wide with this view. Why might you want to examine your strengths in a wider lens? First, assuming you're doing your job well, the clients who hire you as a specialist learn to trust you. Once they trust you, believe me, they will ask you to do nearly anything. Those of you who've been consulting for a while can probably attest to that. I'm not saying that you should take on jobs that you're not qualified to do, but if you see a client need and consider yourself or an associate of yours an expert at solving that problem, you may well go from advising your client on, say, foundation solicitations to, say, advising on programs or coaching new development staff or facilitating fundraising strategy meetings. Those are all real examples of so-called generalist jobs that I've secured over the past 6 months, and all of them were seeded in my area of specialty. So hopefully that is making sense to you. This idea the author Pat Flynn calls skill stacking, and what the benefits of having that kind of generalist backup gives you some advantages. You can do a little less marketing, which is always a wonderful thing. And that's because current and former clients can hire you to do tangential work. Number two, you become better at your specialty because you're constantly studying as a generalist as well, and that pushes you to know your field more broadly and better. And finally, your work stays interesting, and that's always a great thing as well. So one word of warning to new consultants: each new area that you pursue as a generalist will force you to create new tools and methods. So don't take on too many generalist areas at once, but a couple at a time is usually a good way to go. And in short, it does pay to embrace your expertise. So we don't want to get away from that point. If you want to get known by those in your field, you might informally come to be known as the foundations lady, in my case, or Don, maybe the executive transitions guy. If that's the case, then celebrate it. It's great to be known for something, and just don't expect that to define 100% of your work. It's a way to stand out, to get known, and to prove your mettle in the niche that you know best. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Don for our top 5 question number 2.
So our second question that we get a lot is, where do I start with marketing? And so first of all, let's clear up some confusion about what marketing is. Marketing isn't selling. We're going to talk about selling in a moment here, but marketing is everything that you do leading up to the sales process, everything that you do to get prospects to your door. Sales is what you do after they're there. And marketing isn't just promotion. Marketing is some of the most important work that you'll do to define who you serve, what you offer, and in particular, what problem you solve. So where do you begin with marketing? Well, really in our course, what we teach is start with, looking at yourself and asking, what expertise do I have? What is it that I can do better than anyone else? And how does that translate into the services that I'm going to offer? And those are all really good questions. That's a good place to start. But ultimately, the real question revolves around who you serve and the needs that you fill. Marketing guru Seth Godin says that think less about your market than you about your marketing than you do about your market. Let me repeat that. Think less about your marketing than you do about your market. Your services aren't going to be for everyone. You're going to appeal to a very specific set of somebody's, which is your ideal client. So one way to kind of look at this and kind of really break it down into real brass tacks, in our courses we spend a lot of time helping new consultants define their ideal clients. And as you look out at possible ideal clients, what you might want to consider is, first of all, what is it that they're trying to accomplish? See that slice that says emotions? Everybody brings their whole self to their jobs. And there's a lot of mythology out there about people make rational decisions. What science says is people make a decision with their emotion and then they rationalize it. So really want to pay close attention to what is it that they're trying to accomplish and what pain or gain do they want. What pain do they want relieved? What gain do they want to create for themselves? And then ask yourself, what is it that you can do to create that gain or provide some relief to that pain? My work was executive transitions, and I trained a lot of our consultants over the years in our firm. And I told them, when that board member calls you and says that their executive director just resigned, you're not in the executive transition business, you're not in the succession planning business, you're in the pain management business. They're in pain, they want relief of that pain, and that's what's driving their decision making right now. So help them, first of all, acknowledge that and help them focus on what we can do to relieve that pain. So your value proposition is pain relieved, or a gain created, and a happily ever after that you're creating for your client, that difference that they're experiencing having worked with you. So one of the things we encourage you to do is to really envision one ideal client. And here we'd like to do a quick exercise. Consider one of your ideal clients. Go ahead and think about one person whose organization you would love to work with. And if you don't know someone currently at that organization, imagine a representative from that organization. Have you got one in mind? Great. Now, let's consider, what are they trying to accomplish that your services can help them with? What's the pain that they're experiencing or the gain that they really want? And how can you help relieve that pain or create that gain? And finally, what difference would that make for them organizationally, professionally, and, yes, emotionally? That's really the questions that you want to think of when you're thinking about your ideal client. Get those 4 questions down: pain, gain, what they're trying to accomplish, and how you can make a difference for them professionally, organizationally, and emotionally. And that's what really wins the day when it comes to really connecting. And that's really what marketing is all about. So the next step in the process, after you've got your, got your services defined, is to create and test your offer. There are a lot of clients, a lot of consultants out there that, they kind of just go out to the marketplace because they've done some strategic planning and, hang the shingle out that they're, doing strategic planning. But, after you've identified your customer and the pains and gains, then you want to really think realistically that, there are probably multiple offers that you could put in front of them. For example, let's say your ideal client is a nonprofit that doesn't have an up-to-date strategic plan, which, by the way, market research says that's 55% of them. And your offer is really is key into that, how your plan, how your work would be different, and the offer that you can put in front of around that. It's simply not a planning exercise. And they're really going to resonate to 2 different sets of pains and gains. They're going to be a different set of emotions driving their buying decision. So our suggestion is to start off with one offer and test it with 2 or 3 people in your network and pay close attention what resonates with them, whether you're touching on the right gain and the right pain points. And by the time you're going to be marketing to larger audiences, you'll have dialed this in. You'll be singing to a chorus of prospective fans. So to understand their pain points and their needs in a way that naturally brings you together. Susan, back to you.
Okay, well, I love the visual of this one. That was great advice, Don, for marketing. And marketing, in case you're a little unclear about the difference, marketing in its simplest terms, I think, is a one-to-many activity. When you are talking to a room full of people or otherwise writing for a mass market, and selling tends to be one-on-one. And this is where people sometimes start to put their heads down and be a little shy about that. So question 3 is, what if I'm not crazy about selling? We want to do a quick little poll to see exactly how crazy or not you may be about selling. So again, in the chat, let us know on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being cool as a cucumber and 5 being scared senseless, how nervous are you about the selling that's involved in consulting? Let's see. There are a couple of cool as a cucumber, a few 5s mixed in as well. So as before, we've got people a little bit all over the map. Great. Well, it's good. It's good to know where people stand. It seems like we're averaging probably around 3 as a group. So it's, whether you're nervous or not, I'm hopeful you'll learn a little bit. We're going to make this one a little bit brief, but scared, there are a couple people who are scared senseless about this activity, and it's understandable. It seems uncomfortable, but I hope the information we give you here helps get you over that hump. The good news is, if you're comfortable about bragging about your achievements and becoming a know-it-all, you'll be a consulting superstar. Does that make you feel better? Probably not. And I'm kidding anyway. That was a joke. in our experience, this is the stereotype right here of the consultant as a salesperson, loud, maybe aggressive, and that does work for some. But as with all things consulting, you really have to do what feels most authentic to you. And if it makes some of you feel better, you're hearing from two introverts today. So, and we've both had long histories with our businesses at this point, so it really can work for anybody. So let's forget about the stereotypes, and it's just really important that you keep authenticity in mind when you're selling, because you will tend to attract clients whose character traits are somewhat aligned with yours, and that tends to make the relationship go better from the beginning, since chemistry is such a huge part of consulting, and frankly a part that's not talked about very often. So confident selling tends to have these three components: radiating authenticity, as we just discussed, asking good questions, which does take practice, but really any of us can learn to do, and most important, listening. And it's that third piece that I think a lot of people tend to overlook when they're selling. They think they need to go out and talk about all the things that they've done, whether in-house or as a consultant, and really it's the very opposite that's true. I think in the way Don was just mentioning, the potential clients really want to first be heard. They want you to understand their pain points, and only then can you start being effective as a consultant. So let's just say that, we're on to number 4, but I'll say that we are two admitted introverts, so I'll just reiterate that if you are yourself and your true self, you will end up attracting clients that are really well suited for you and that you can maintain long term. So a little anticlimactic, admittedly, but here we are at number 4, Don, and this is the juicy one. So glad we've got some extra time for this one.
Good deal. Well, we're going to dig deep in this one, but before we do, I'm just loving some of the comments in here. Paul says, successful fundraisers know how to sell. And let's see, Jody says, I enjoy selling, so great, but seeing lots of 5s in there as well. So, but rest assured, in fact, Susan and I did a webinar not too long ago on consulting for introverts, and that's one of the things that we found is that there's a whole lot of myths about introverts and selling, but actually some of the most effective business people on this planet, including the 4 richest Americans, are introverts. So rise up, you introverts. So let's get into what should I charge is a question we get a lot. And we actually think that there's this really is a big question, and we hear it a lot. So we're going to spend a fair amount of time on this one. And we all want a magic number, but we think really a more empowering question really is how can I set fees that work? And that's what we teach in our course is how to dig into that. And we're going to run through some of the highlights here. So there are many factors involved in answering this question of how can I set fees that work. But really it boils down to, first of all, a really simple equation. You've got a client with a need, a service that satisfies that need, and it's being provided at a price that both the client and the consultant can live with. In other words, a fee that works. That's the definition of a fee that works. So then the question is, well, how do you set fees that work? And our larger point in answering this question is to help you define your fees based on what you want to get out of your business rather than letting the market or client's expectations dictate your fees by default. Now, this is, I call this the $100,000 aha, because this is a piece of advice I wished I had gotten, at the beginning of my consulting career instead of several years into it. Because what we teach is our first step. The first step in setting fees that work is to pay yourself first. What do we mean by that? First of all, by figuring out how much you need to make your business work for you, to make it sustainable over the long term. And this is a step that many, if not most consultants skip. They dip their toe in the water, in the consulting water, and kind of hope for the best. And they're really not strategic about determining the income that they need. So we're going to walk you through some steps here that really can make a big difference in terms of your your income and making sure that your business is sustainable. In our workshops, we walk participants through an Excel file that capture all the income, the goals, and what you want to make, your health insurance, retirement, everything, all of your projected business expenses, and then we add a profit margin to that, and all that tallied, your income, your expenses, and your business margin, your profit margin, establishes what we call the baseline. So labor there, that's really what you want to get out personally, what you want to draw out of your business. You're going to have some business overhead. It's usually pretty modest for, consulting firms, but there still really is some overhead. And for a lot of us, folks in the nonprofit world, we have a hard time, putting that profit margin in there. But if you want to build for the future, you got to establish that profit margin. So once you've established this is your baseline revenue number that you need to sustain your business. Then you need to turn that overall revenue number into some useful measures. Now, we don't have time to get into, kind of different billing methods. We're just going to talk about two of them. So if you plan to bill mostly by the hour, then you want to divide that baseline number, that labor plus overhead plus profit, that baseline number by a reasonable number of billable hours that you expect to bill in a year. Now, starting out, you're not going to be able to bill those numbers. That's a different problem. That's a marketing problem. But what we want to do is we want to establish a baseline number hourly rate. And if you do that, all those three items there, divided by a reasonable number of billable hours in a year, you got your target hourly rate. Now, a lot of us, use a project fee approach where we charge a flat rate for projects, and then your measure might be the total number of projects that you think that you could do in a year at an average fee level, and that will, whatever it takes to get you to your, that number, that baseline number. Well, why would you want to do that? Well, first of all, pay yourself first. Otherwise, you're not going to have a sustainable business. Second of all, it's going to boost your confidence off the charts. You're not being blown by the winds of client expectations. You're steaming ahead, knowing what your business really needs to make for you, and what you need to draw out of it for it to work for you over the long term. Now, the second thing to consider in this is your client's perspective. You really want to understand your client's what's going on in your client's mind about the project. And now you may be wondering why we're starting with the client rather than the market, because back to that little Venn diagram that we started off with, to make a fee that works, that's a decision that's made by people. Markets don't make decisions, people do. And so, at this point, you could be home free. If you're happy with what you're charging, the client's happy with it, you're home free. You could really stop there. But markets can provide important information, and let's talk a little bit about that in a moment here. But let's dig in a little deeper on what your client's perspective is. So the first question you want to ask yourself is, what do they have at stake here in this? What's their level of concern surrounding the need or the problem or the issue or the desire that they're asking you to address with your services? Back to those pains and gains and emotional drivers that we talked about earlier. So what do they have at stake? The higher the stakes, the more flexible they're going to be on the fee. Second question is, what value do they place on the solution that you offer? Is this really a slam dunk, dovetails perfectly with their need? Again, they're probably going to be a little bit more receptive to your fee negotiations in that point. Third, what do they have any ideas about what they should pay for this kind of service? Now, it might be a notion about a going rate in their market, or it could be a budget number that they're working up against. It's like, what's going on in their minds about what they're thinking about what they should pay. And the final or fourth question is, how do they perceive you? Is there a prestige or a credibility factor that's working for you or against you? Are you up against the old hand? Are you the old hand in your market for this particular service? So then back to the baseline. What happens then is you've established your client's perspective, and you have a little bit of a sense of what's the wiggle room here in your client's perspective. If what's going on in their minds that's shaping their ideas about what's an acceptable fee level. Now, if your baseline is below their expectations, remember your baseline is your floor, not your ceiling. That extra profit margin up there in the green zone, that's going to help you build your financial cushion just that much faster. Now, if it's below your baseline, you've got a challenge on your hand. You've got a challenge to elevate your value in the eyes of so that your fee level at least meets the baseline, if not more. Back to those, what do they have at stake? What do they value? How do they perceive you? And do they have notions about what they should pay? And how can you then creatively, if they're working up against a budget, hard budget figure, how can you help them creatively meet that? Okay? And then the next step in the process is really to look at what differentiates you, which probably going to involve some persuasive information about what differentiates you from your competition. What makes your fee level worth so much more than the going rate, for example. Of course, to be able to make those points, you're going to need to do some market research, which brings us to our third step in the setting fees at work is to research and understand your market, to thoroughly understand your market. What's the going rate for your type of services in your market? What's the level of competition for those services? And really, the important point is, what's your competitive advantage? Again, a lot of us nonprofit folk don't like to think about us having, competition, but we do. The reality is that we do, so you really need to be clear about what's your competitive advantage. So if this sounds like market research, you're right. But market research really isn't that hard to do. The first few steps in market research are really ask your consulting colleagues. You'd be surprised how many people will be ready to talk shop with you and talk about how they bill and what they charge. And second, carefully review the websites of consultants who are your most likely competitors. And third step in the process, if I was starting out today, would be talk to the key trade associations or professional societies in your ideal customers field. Oftentimes we talk to our, the folks in our field, and we kind of get an echo chamber. You want to get out there. Once you've identified your ideal customer, is really get out there in their world and talk to the people that they're interacting with and the people that are knowledgeable about your ideal clients' situations. And then obviously the fourth thing really is to get out there and talk to, prospective clients directly. Go to their trade association meetings, go to their conferences. The receptions and luncheon tables at those meetings are a great place to do some market research. So once you've done that, once you've established that, we've added something else, another column to your this baseline that we're working against, and to turn that into some talking points and differentiators that you can use in your fee negotiations. Like try to identify who your most likely competitors are and what they're charging. Come up with 4 or 5 bullet points about what's your competitive advantage. What are those differentiators? What makes you really different and special here in this process? And then give some thought about how you might package your services to increase their value, which brings us to the final step in the process, which is really decide what kind of brand do you want to create. So really this is one factor that affects really all the steps that we just discussed in this 4-step process, and that's the brand or the business that you'd like to create. Now, this might be influenced by your income needs or the market that you live in or your experience in the industry or the field that you're coming from or the things that you're hearing from, potential clients. But really it's coming down to, are you upscale and exclusive or are you mass market? Are you Bentley or Buick or Tesla or Toyota? Now, obviously the market that you choose is going to have its own sensibility about price and how they, the sense of value that they place on things and how you sell to them. But reality is you're probably going to find yourself cycling through this. This is not a, once and you're done. This is a rinse and repeat process because as your business grows and you start gaining more intelligence, you're going to start, you're going to start tweaking this and really dialing in on your market. But really it starts with, first of all, identifying that ideal customer and then building your understanding around that. So just a quick recap here. Pay yourself first. Sorry, the slide's not moving here. There we go. Okay. Pay yourself first, establish your baseline number and the measures that you can use to get to that number. Second, understand your client's perspective. Again, if you can, negotiate a fee that works for both of you, you're home free, but you might be leaving money on the table. So the third step is really to research the market, and fourth, decide what kind of brand you want to create. Again, you're probably going to find yourself cycling through these points as you learn more about your market, gain more experience, and gain more confidence as a consultant. And speaking of confidence, back to Susan.
Thanks, Don. That's a lot I know that Don just covered. So feel free to ask some follow-up questions if you'd like in the chat for our Q&A, which is coming up momentarily. Again, we have some tools that take you into this on a much deeper level in our workshops, but it's a lot to think about, and there's more than just numbers, as you can see, that affects the price that you set. So thanks, Don. Those are some terrific insights. And if you come away from discussions like that feeling, oh my gosh, is this actually a career that I can tackle? You're not alone, because after years of training new consultants around the country, one topic that comes up repeatedly and is not addressed directly in most tutorials in this field is this one about confidence. Almost without fail, when Don and I do a workshop, whether it's online or in person, for the end of the workshop, when the trust among the group is really high, we tend to get someone who raises their hand and realizes this is my last chance to ask a burning question, and what should I do if my confidence is not high? And then there's lots of nods of agreement in the room. So you are not alone if you feel this way. And the question really, I think, is whether confidence is a prerequisite for this career choice. Every consultant's confidence does waver over time. We all feel great when things are humming along, and it's fair to say that most of us question ourselves in the inevitable times when business is slow or we are unsure how to handle a situation. It really might be unrealistic for you to feel confident if you're one of those who said earlier that you've not begun this consulting journey yet, and that's completely understandable because you're just getting started. But, I'll say even for myself that after consulting for about 2 years, I was forced to nearly shut down my business because I was recovering from some surgery, and I really did not have the confidence to think that my business would just spring back to life several months later. It was really heart-wrenching. So I did have hope that I would get back to things, but not necessarily confidence, I'll be honest about that. Yet, if the same thing happened today, of course, I would have much greater certainty that I could get things popping again. So it's just to say that the more you learn and the longer you're at this, the more confident you will feel. And you certainly should not expect to feel highly confident as a novice. So we'll just say quickly, we hope you feel a little relieved to hear that. And there are people who are well into their consulting practices. For those of you who, there are several of you who said that you were far into your practices at this point, who may not feel 100% confident. And I'll just say quickly, a friend and associate of mine who's been consulting for 10 years recently went through a bout where her business really slowed significantly recently. And I saw her confidence plummet. She wondered if she should go in-house. And then she really did the hard work of pounding the pavement, doing a lot of marketing and one-on-one meetings with people. And sure enough, things did bounce back, and she's right back where she was. But it's all to say that this can really happen at any point, and it really is a part of this career path, as it is many career paths, but maybe a little more prominent because many of us are soloists and don't always have colleagues to share with. So it's important to know that, as we started out saying today, that you should just be your authentic self. And when you build a business out of that authentic self, you will find the ideal clients that will tend to keep you feeling good and feeling like they're looking for consultants, none other than you. so sure, over time you'll want to polish things like your own presentation skills or conversation skills, but really clients are attracted to people who do have chemistry with them. So it's important to be your authentic self, and that does tend to bring confidence. I'm going back to my favorite slide in the presentation, and in saying that if you take away one thing today, it will be that you really don't need to fit this image. If you do, there's nothing wrong with that, but that it's your authentic self that really is going to find a place in the market for your new business. So keep in mind that deliberate practice is really what breeds confidence, and we really hope that you'll take that away today. And it breeds confidence. It also breeds a lot of knowledge about where you should set your fees and how you should market and all of the things we talked about. So learning consistently is certainly a piece of this field. You've got to prepare well, remain a student of your specialty area, get better at some of those more tangential and generalist areas, and importantly, just learn to be a good consultant, which means also being a good business person. A lot of us don't think about it in that light as we begin. So we're going to give you some more resources momentarily, but let's just recap where we've been today real quickly. First, to say that specialists are memorable, so think about your strengths and where you can specialize. Also think about your market, not your marketing, and that's envisioning your ideal client. Third, our little selling equation that authenticity plus listening plus good questions is really a terrific formula, no matter if you're a fundraiser and used to this kind of conversation, or if you're someone who's been behind the scenes and is not so used to that whole selling equation. Setting fees that work is a work in progress, and it is a process, and there are lots of pieces to it. The good news is you can tweak as you go over the months and years. And finally, confidence blossoms with deep preparation. So along those lines, before we get to questions, a couple of resources. One that was promised to you. You'll see here, this is the homepage from our website. So we want to tell you we've set up a special page that is just for folks on this webinar. Our business that we use to conduct these webinars is goingsologoingbig.com. So if you go to goingsologoingbig.com/Bloomerang, you'll find the resources that we're going to talk about quickly, including the startup checklist that we mentioned earlier. We do also have our signature launch course, which has received 4.8 out of 5 stars, we're happy to say, by the folks who have taken it over the years. It's a 4-week online course that covers the A to Z of starting a successful consulting business. And you'll see the checklist that you get today has some pieces from some of those lessons, so you'll get a taste of what that looks like. But in short, Don and I walk you through what you need to know to turn your consulting, your current know-how into what we like to call consulting wow, and will help you get off to a solid start. So for those of you who have been at it for a while, at the same website address, you can also find information about our new offerings coming later this year for those who are already experienced consultants. These are going to be shorter online classes that are specific to people who have been at it for a while. So that said, let's dive into your questions, and I know there have been a lot of them, so I'll turn it back over to you, Stephen, to let us know where to go from here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, first, we owe you, both of you, Susan and Don, some thanks. That was an awesome presentation, great insights, and I'm sure everyone listening along would agree. Really good stuff here. I kind of feel like I want to become a consultant after listening to you two, but if I won't, don't worry. But you inspired me regardless. So, yeah, we got a lot of questions here. I'm just going to dive into ones that I thought were pretty interesting. Here's one from Jessica that I thought was pretty interesting. Do you ever feel like you need to go back to working at a nonprofit, kind of boots on the ground as a staff member, just to kind of stay relevant? Susan, maybe have you ever experienced maybe like, you know, you've been out of the game for a while, been consulting for a long time. Is there any Any thought to maybe going back into the sector just to kind of, get used to how things are, or do you think that's not something you've had to struggle with?
It is a great question that Jessica asked, and I'll say that there are lots of consultants I know. Well, I shouldn't say lots. There are a decent number I know who intentionally go back and forth every several years between consulting and in-house because they want to keep themselves fresh, or they miss the camaraderie of being in-house, both of which I think are great reasons to do it. I'll be honest, for me, I have not had the same urge, in part because I think my business model is one of working with a handful of foundations at a time, handful of nonprofits at a time, and working with them deeply. So I feel like I'm still learning a lot about the in-house experience, even though I'm not in-house. If your business model is one that is a little more, has a bit of an aerial view, if you do coaching or something where you've got lots more clients, that might be reason to go in-house. There are lots of reasons to do it. So I haven't personally, but lots of people do, and it is a terrific alternative.
Cool.
If I could chime in,
go for it, John.
So I think my own experiences, I've learned a ton more as a consultant every year, every day than I have as an executive director, because you have the whole world in front of you. And so my particular approach is there's every year I set up a certain number of growing edges that I really want to explore, even at this seasoned age of 68. My growing edges are storytelling and, doing a better job at marketing and selling and so forth. So, I think you have a lot more flexibility to learn as a consultant, than, at least as I ever did as an executive.
Cool. Makes sense. Here's one from Louisa. She's 23, looking into graduate school, and curious about maybe advanced degrees or certification. Do you think an MBA or maybe a degree in nonprofit management would serve her better, maybe one more than the other? What do you two think of sort of the advanced degrees in terms of, helping you through this process and gaining credibility and gaining that knowledge?
I'll be happy to take that, since I got a master's in nonprofit management, and the following year the program turned into an MBA. so in that regard, they're starting to look very similar to each other at some schools. Honestly, and I think Don got at this in his last answer, I think that when you're a consultant, and if you aspire to be a consultant, learning as much as you can is just the way to go in general. So, I'd say, Louisa, you might look specifically at the content. Nonprofit management degree might give you the nonprofit finance angle more than an MBA. The bent might be more toward the nonprofit sector. So if you're sure that you want to consult in this sector, that might be a good way to go. But I think the degrees in general get at the same information, just with a different bent. So if nonprofit is it for you, go for it. But I'd say the more degrees, certificates, books, webinars you've got at any age and stage, the better.
Hey, Stephen, I noticed earlier that there was a question about whether or not there's going to be a replay, and yes, there is.
Yes.
So I just
definitely.
Sure
we'll get you all the recording and the slides. Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Here's a pretty interesting one from Roger, and Don, when I saw this question, I thought of you immediately because of your background. Roger comes from the tech world, transitioned into nonprofit development, and then tech consulting. Any advice for people who don't come from the nonprofit world but maybe want to get into it, maybe if they come from the business world or maybe academia? Any advice there for making that transition versus coming out of a nonprofit?
Yeah. In fact, let me tie it to a question that was raised earlier about how do you make the kind of leap from one skill set to another. I think I can answer both of those questions. So first of all, Roger, coming from the tech world, the phrase "the adjacent possible," right? And my corollary around that is the adjacent doable or the adjacent sellable in some cases. And so I think, when you're doing consulting work, you really have to start somewhere with some set of accomplishments or some set of skills that you're, putting out in front of clients. But then, back to that growing edge idea that I raised earlier, really taking a look at, well, what's the next horizon that I would like to tackle? So for my particular case, I started off primarily in planning, as a consultant. I had been an executive director. I started off in planning. I got lots of requests around that. But then I really figured out a way to dial in on a much higher level of pain and a higher level of gain by focusing on executive transitions. That's the high pain point, for nonprofits. So first of all, I'd start with where you are. Take a look at what you do. If you got some tech skills, start there and, start to work around that, and you can begin to branch out. And then, Susan, do you want to chime in on that as well?
No, I think you've got it covered. Great advice.
Okay. Well, yeah. So the earlier question had to do with, what if you're coming from like grant consulting, and how can you branch out into boards or strategic planning? And Susan, I know that you made that segue from, and that you've actually written a book on board service for the genius, and that really kind of was offshoot of your fundraising work, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think that initial idea about being a specialist, being a generalist, and even down the list of things that you are currently studying, they're all great models of how to keep learning and building skills. We mentioned at the end of the webinar that you want to build skills that help you be a good business person, help you present yourself well. And, and the tangents that these things can take you on are sometimes seemingly unrelated to your area of specialty, but the beauty of having your own business these days is that you can bring them back in whatever ways you'd like. I mean, when I worked on this book about board service, it was really a passion of mine. And then I spent a few years of my business really doing more work around board development than I had done before. And it was just a wonderful diversion to take. We talked earlier about going in-house, but as a consultant, you can vary your career in so many ways. I've taught at universities, written books, done kind of little tours related to those books, and therefore traveled more, taken clients in town, out of town. And so your career is really what you decide to make of it. So this whole idea of skill building, it can be a real journey, and it can be fun actually to let it take you to new places.
I love it. Well, there are a lot of good questions in here. I don't think we're going to have time to get to all of them, but there's one here that might be a good one to end on from Alex, wondering, how do you know when you're ready to start consulting? Looks like they've been working in-house, just kind of been maybe waiting for those signals or signs from above, whatever it is, to know when to take that leap. When did you two know that it was time to branch out and do this?
Don, you want to take that first?
Oh, well, I think I came to the conclusion that at a certain point that I was unemployable, that I really didn't, to be honest with you, I probably shouldn't say this in a recorded format, but I was really done working for boards, working for a board. But what do I do now? I work for boards constantly. So I think I was really done being an employee, and and it really kind of hit home to me. I took Gretchen Rubin's assessment and found out that I'm a rebel through and through. Don't tell me how to do it; I'll do it myself. And so I think that was part of it. I think I think some of those tools can kind of give you insights. But you know what? Ultimately, I think you put your bet down on yourself, and and you make that leap, but make that leap informed. And part of the one of the ways that you can help inform yourself, if you go to our website, goingsologoingbig.com, there's a and put in the / quiz. I think there's actually a link on the menu. It'll take you to a free quiz that you can take that Susan and I put together to take a look at the 10 things that you need to have to be a successful consultant. 5 you got to bring with you, and 5 you can build along the way. So I just encourage you to take a look at that. It's free, and it's a fun little quiz.
Awesome. I love it. Check it out. Well, we're out of time, but man, this was awesome. This was a lot of fun. So Susan, Don, thanks for taking time out of your day to share your experiences and your knowledge with us, and I hope everyone listening along got as much out of it as I did. So thanks, you two. This was awesome.
Well,
Great.
thanks
so much. And those of you with additional questions, feel free to go to our website and plug them in there. We'd be happy to chat with you to answer the questions that didn't get answered yet.
Absolutely. More than happy.
Sweet. Well,
thanks.
Don mentioned it a couple of times, and I'm really happy he did. Succession planning is our next topic. Really, really important. When Don said that it's like one of the most important things, he is right. And you're going to hear all about it from Andy Robinson next Thursday. So 2 p.m. Eastern, same time, same place. If you don't have any plans, come back and see us. And if maybe you're not interested in that topic, I don't know why you wouldn't be. It's really important. You should check it out. But if you're not, that's okay. There's still a lot of other topics that we're going to cover in our webinar series out into the future. So visit that page. Hopefully we'll see you again some other Thursday session that we're going to be having. So we'll call it a day there. Look for an email from me with the recording and the slides. I'll get that to you this afternoon. And hopefully we'll see you again next week. So have a good rest of your Thursday. Have a safe weekend. Stay warm out there. And we'll talk to you again soon. Bye now.